Amazing moment revealed. Millionaire SOS autistic son has hidden connection with one inspiring. Ethan sat in the expansive attic, shadows dancing around him as rain pelted the old wooden roof above. Dust motes floated like lost hopes in the thin beams of light that penetrated the old grimy window. Among the forgotten memories, Ethan stumbled upon a weathered leather journal his grandfather's. Flicking it open, he was instantly consumed by the sketches of vivid landscapes and heartfelt reflections on resilience that spilled from the pages. Each entry brought the ghost of a man to life, a painter who painted not just to create, but to survive. The inspiration flickering within him whispered that art could be more than a mere side hobby, it could be a lifeline. But as he engrossed himself deeper into the journal, unease gripped him. What would his father, Mark, think? Mark, the millionaire entrepreneur who had built his empire from nothing, was a beacon of success in every elite circle. As Ethan grew aware of the creeping pressure to mirror his father's greatness, the internal battle intensified. Being different, being autistic, meant that expectations weren't just weights, they were boulders. The fear of failure loomed large, threatening to drown him in a sea of societal standards that felt nearly impossible to navigate. Why paint when he was meant to follow a well-mapped path? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Ethan's world felt suffocating the moment he stepped back into school. His peers, unaware of the creative storm brewing inside him, mocked his artistic dreams with careless laughter. Why not study hard like everyone else? You think painting can lead you anywhere? Their jeers echoed long after he slipped inside the refuge of the art room, fueling the insecurities gnawing at him. His impulse to comply battled against his yearning for authenticity, a truth buried under layers of expectation. When he surprised himself by submitting a piece to a local gallery's exhibition, the decision heightened the swirl of anxiety. The moment of unveiling felt like a high-stakes gamble. The swirling voices in his head questioned every choice he made. What if they didn't like it? What if his father found out and disapproved? The weight of those thoughts twisted in his gut like a coiled snake. Dread threatened to drown him, and he longed for acceptance, yet wondered at what cost. As the night of the gallery opening drew closer, Ethan's hands trembled at what lay ahead. Standing among a sea of polished suits and critical gazes, he felt so out of place that it threatened to swallow him whole. Each compliment from passing guests pricked at his fragile self-image, and amid the admiration, the looming figure of his father caught his eye. Mark's expression mingled pride and confusion, a potent mix that only heightened Ethan's internal chaos. The moment stood stiff in the air, a storm brewing at the crossroads of ambition and familial duty, but which path would he choose? With sweat trickling down his neck and uncertainty clawing at his stomach, Ethan faced an unyielding truth. Brilliance could lie hidden beneath an artist's brushstroke, but what if the world remained blind to what he could become? Embracing the unfamiliar felt like courting disaster. The question burned: could he redefine himself against the expectations that sought to define him? As the night unfolded, Ethan stood at the brink, where the vibrant hues of possibility intertwined with shadows of doubt, all waiting to be unleashed. Ethan awoke with a start, the echoes of last night's opening still reverberating in his mind. The gallery's bright lights, the murmurs of appreciation, and most glaring the look on his father's face replayed over and over like a broken record. This was no mere exhibition. It was a battlefield, and he had traded his paintbrush for a sword. He glanced at the paint-splattered clothes strewn across his floor, remnants of his creative fight. Each brushstroke was a silent rebellion against expectations he barely understood. But now the aftermath plagued him. The compliments felt hollow, as if they were wrapped in layers of irony designed to mask the truth. He had stepped out of the shadows, only to find himself under an unyielding spotlight. Mark would likely scrutinize every detail, every fleeting moment of praise. The thought of disappointing his father brought a tightness to his chest. Why hadn't he simply followed the predetermined path? Because that path led to a life half-lived, a fate he was determined to escape. Over the next few days, Ethan withdrew into himself, convinced that the external world was a reflection of the inadequacies he fought so vehemently against. Sketching became his only solace and escape where he felt powerful, yet the unease of reality seeped through like rain on a cracked roof. It was during one of these solitary sessions that he stumbled upon his grandfather's words again. Art is truth, embrace its chaos. So why was he so afraid of finding his own truth? Determined to reclaim his artistry, he pushed his reservations aside and decided to delve deeper into his creative roots. He reached for the paint tube that had become synonymous with his anxiety and squeezed, letting the color swirl onto the canvas liberally. Each stroke began to alleviate his burden, reminding him that creation wasn't just an escape. It was a lifeline tethered to his identity. Encouraged by bursts of inspiration, he began using his art to process the swirling thoughts of expectation and fear. He explored the idea of his identity as a prism shattered into myriad colors by the demands of those around him but beautiful nonetheless. With this new perspective, he envisioned submitting another piece to a bigger showcase, an act tantamount to stepping into the lion's den. But this time uncertainty transformed into exhilaration. Confronting his fears required a strategic plan. He mapped out a series of sketches, envisioning a body of work that intimately narrated his journey. Each piece was imbued with fragments of his experiences, layering vulnerability over strength, pride over doubt. Surrounding himself with inspirational quotes from his grandfather, Ethan dedicated every minute to honing his craft, determined to bridge the gap between who he was expected to be and who he aspired to become. Yet, even as he painted with fervor, an impending challenge loomed on the horizon: the need to confront his father. Eventually, the moment would come when Mark would question Ethan's dedication to art, challenging his choices unequivocally. The dichotomy between familial loyalty and navigating his own path created a storm of its own. That conversation weighed heavily in his mind. Then came the invitation to the premier art competition, one that could provide an opportunity to showcase his work to a much larger audience. The exhilaration of acceptance cracked through the walls he'd built. Was he ready to risk everything? To stake his identity on the canvas? The night loomed large, a spectral presence in the back of his mind, an uninvited guest destined to stir the pot of his anxieties. As Ethan prepared to enter this new stage, he realized acceptance wouldn't come from external validation but rather the courage to embrace who he was. With a quivering heart, he understood achieving his dreams meant finally standing tall against the tides of expectation. Yet, just as the thought settled, a message from his father illuminated his phone screen. The message read, "We need to talk. Urgently." The walls he had begun to dismantle now threatened to close in. How would he articulate these desires, these hopes? And what would follow? The weight of the moment pressed down heavily, coaxing a mix of resolve and trepidation. Ethan took a breath, standing on a precipice that promised transformation. But would he leap or would he retreat, allowing the fear to dictate his choices once more? Ethan's heart raced as the shards of his reality collided. The message from his father hung heavy in the air like an unfinished painting. What is this urgency? The implications twisted painfully in Ethan's gut. He was acutely aware of the precarious balance he had to maintain. His identity was a fragile construct, now threatened by the very person he longed to impress. He scrolled through his phone in search of distractions, ultimately landing on an image of his latest artwork, a chaotic canvas bursting with colors that mirrored his tumultuous emotions. The sight sparked a flicker of determination within him. More than a mere representation of his thoughts, that piece had become a testament to his journey, a rebellion against conformity. Each stroke conveyed an unfiltered expression of his soul. Past conversations with his grandfather echoed within him. Art is a dialogue, Ethan. Speak boldly. Could he channel that dialogue tonight in the inevitable confrontation with his father? Determined, Ethan paced around his small studio, his hands anxiously wringing the hem of his paint-stained shirt. He envisioned his next canvas, filled with layers that spoke of expectations and the struggle for authenticity. That vision stabilized him, a reminder that even in chaos, beauty could emerge. The hours dragged, each tick of the clock amplifying the tension in his mind. We need to talk. Urgently. Those words felt like a storm approaching, laden with rain clouds of disappointment and unresolved emotions. But beyond the fear was a glimmer of defiance. What if he didn't yield to the weight of those words? What if the conversation led to a breakthrough rather than a breakdown? Finally, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting shadows that danced along the walls of his studio, Ethan felt ignited. No longer a passive canvas to be painted upon by his father's expectations, tonight, he would wield the brush. As he stepped toward the door, he visualized the moment. Would he sink into the familiar role of the obedient son, or would he stand his ground? The thought propelled him forward. The drive to his father's house felt interminable. Each road a metaphor for the divergence between their worlds. The glossy buildings outside reflected the societal standards Mark represented, while he, in contrast, was an ambitious artist grappling with insecurities. When Ethan finally arrived, the parking lot shimmered under the evening lights, imposing and cold. He inhaled deeply, letting the crisp air fill his lungs. The confrontation awaited him, a chance to bridge the chasm between father and son. Inside, the atmosphere was tense. Mark waited in the living room, his presence larger than life, an immovable object at the center of Ethan's emotional storm. Forcing himself to maintain eye contact, Ethan felt a wave of adrenaline surge through him. He had to fight for what he believed. "Ethan," Mark began, his voice steady, but there was an edge beneath it, a mixture of concern and expectation. "Dad, I need to talk first," Ethan interjected, surprising himself with the clarity in his tone. "I'm an artist and I am serious about this, about my work. It's not just a phase." His father furrowed his brow, confusion knitting his face together. Ethan pressed on, feeling the rush of newfound strength. "I know you have dreams for me, but they don't align with who I truly am. I want my art to speak for me, not what you or anyone else expects of me." His words hung in the air. A mixture of hope and dread mingled, challenging what Mark believed about his son. The uncertainty of how Mark would respond simmered just beneath the surface, a volatile mix of anticipation and fear. "What happened in that gallery?" Mark started. "Was it really what you want?" The question reverberated, the conversation teetering on the edge of revelation. Would this be the moment he revealed the truth about himself, or retreat back to where his father's unconditional love felt safer but suffocating? Ethan hesitated, recognizing that this pivotal moment determined more than just his artistic journey. It was a choice between fear and freedom. As he opened his mouth to speak, Ethan felt the thrill of risk swirl in his veins. He had taken a step toward authenticity, but would he be able to hold his ground against the tide of expectation, or would he allow himself to drown in it instead? Each heartbeat thundered like a countdown, pushing Ethan closer to the precipice of his future. Ethan took a resolute breath, the air thick with vulnerability and unspoken truths. The silence in the room felt almost tangible, wrapping around him like a dense fog. He could see the flicker of emotions crossing his father's face. Surprise, then concern, and finally a hint of disappointment. Would Ethan's revelation sound like rebellion? Or could it be perceived as a legitimate pursuit of passion? I want to be seen for who I am," Ethan finally confessed, tightening his grip on the coffee table to steady himself. "I'm more than just your son or a name on a business card." Mark's expression shifted, a slight crack forming in his solid demeanor. "I just want what's best for you, Ethan. You're choosing an unstable career path. What if this falls apart?" A pang of frustration coursed through Ethan. "This isn't about financial security, Dad. This is about my life, my art. You don't understand. I've spent so long trying to fit into what you envisioned for me, but it feels like a cage." He watched as Mark absorbed the words, his posture stiffening. The father-son dynamic felt like a high-wire act, balancing precariously over the deep chasm of unexpressed emotions. Yet, Ethan had made the choice to share his truth, risking everything for the sake of authenticity. "Art feeds my soul. It's my way of connecting with the world." The pang of self-doubt threatened to draw him back, but he pressed forward. "I want to inspire, I want to evoke feelings in people. That matters to me." "Ethan, you're talented. No one is taking that away from you," Mark replied, frustration now lining his voice. "But talent doesn't pay the bills," Ethan interrupted, his voice rising slightly. "It's not just about the money. I don't want to spend my life in someone else's shadow. I can't do it anymore." The conviction in his tone surprised even him, buoyed by a fierce determination bubbling beneath the surface. Mark's face fell. The disappointment was stark. "You'll let everyone down. Your mother, your family. We've put so much into your education, the connections we have. How can you just throw that away? The argument spun in circles, a dizzying cycle of expectations and fears. Yet, amid the brooding tension, Ethan felt a shift within himself. Years of suppressing his dreams for the comfort of familial approval were rising like a tide, threatening to engulf him if he didn't swim against it. "Dad, look at me," he urged. "I need you to trust me. I've got opportunities ahead of me. I can showcase my work. I've been offered a chance to exhibit in a gallery next month. This is real for me." Mark's brow furrowed deeper. Skepticism haunted his eyes. "And if you fail?" Ethan's heart thudded. The fear of failure lurked in the shadows, but the parallel fear of never trying suffocated his soul. "I'd rather fail trying than live a life dictated by others' expectations. This is my shot." For the first time, silence fell not out of discomfort but from the weight of self-awareness shared between them. Mark studied him, and the silence sparked questions around both their futures. A reconciliation seemed imminent, but uncertainty and endurance were bound to shape the outcome. "Ethan," Mark finally said softly, "if this is truly what you want, I need you to prove it. Show everyone that you can make it as an artist." Ethan's breath caught. This was more than he had anticipated. The path was open yet fraught with challenges. It was a dare as much as an opportunity, and determination flooded through his veins. "Then I will," he vowed, the words igniting a fire he didn't realize was there. "I'll prove to you and to myself that I belong in this world." As the night deepened and shadows cast heavy within the living room, Ethan felt a seismic shift within his relationship with his father. It was the beginning of an uncertain journey, but it was also a newfound freedom, an invitation to unleash his creativity without regret. He was stepping off the edge, ready to embrace whatever came next. Inside him, questions surged to the forefront. What did it mean to truly show his worth? How far was he willing to go in his quest for artistic authenticity? As these thoughts clashed within him, Ethan stood at the precipice of his future, the brush poised above the canvas of life. The impact of this moment echoed, leaving him to ponder the real stakes of his next decision. Would he be able to maintain his resolve, or would the tide of expectations pull him back beneath the surface once again? The next morning, the light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across Ethan's room. The familiarity of his surroundings now felt like a canvas begging for change. As he sat on the edge of his bed, the weight of yesterday's confrontation loomed large, but beneath it thrummed a newfound excitement. This was the first morning of his new life, a life where his aspirations were no longer muted. After a quick breakfast, Ethan grabbed his paintbrushes and headed to the small studio in the basement that he had converted into his creative sanctuary. Each step felt different, more purposeful. The air crackled with possibilities. He closed the door and took a deep breath, absorbing the sense of paint and varnish, the essence of quiet creation. His first task was to prepare for the upcoming gallery exhibit. He pulled out canvas after canvas, each one filled with fragments of his artistic journey. For years, these pieces had been sheltered under layers of insecurity and fear, but now they could breathe, eager to find their place in the world. As he laid them out, he began to see patterns emerge, a story unfurling that spoke to his struggles and triumphs. Determined to create a piece that would resonate deeply, Ethan started sketching ideas, letting his hand flow free. A striking image began to take form, bold colors splashing onto the canvas, intersecting in chaos yet somehow blending into a landscape of emotions. It was as if every brushstroke carried a piece of his heart, a call for authenticity amidst the noise of expectations. As he painted, doubts crept in, slithering through his determination like shadows. Would his work truly capture the essence of his journey? Would the gallery visitors understand his vision? A knot of anxiety twisted in his stomach. Yet, he quickly squashed it, reminding himself of his father's challenge. This was about proving himself not only to Mark but also to the most critical audience of all, himself. The clock ticked away the hours, and with each moment, Ethan felt a shift in his capabilities. The smooth strokes of paint transformed into new techniques he had never dared to explore before. He tried layering colors in ways he had been taught, yet never fully embraced. Stretching his boundaries ignited a wave of exhilaration within him. The more he pushed, the more vibrant his pieces became, the more he recognized his unique voice. When evening fell, a sense of exhaustion engulfed his body, but it was accompanied by an invigorating thrill. Stepping back from his latest piece, he marveled at the splashes of color erupting like fireworks against the canvas. It represented freedom, the freedom to express and be seen. But the flickers of doubt persisted. Could he truly sustain this authenticity? Would he find a way to balance his creativity with the precarious expectations of family, reputation, and society at large? He was stepping into unfamiliar territory. An artist's life was filled with highs and lows, triumphs and defeats. Ethan realized he needed support. He thought of reaching out to the few friends he had made in the art community, people who shared his passion and could offer guidance. But was it too soon? Would that make him appear desperate? A wave of hesitation washed over him, but he shook it off. In that moment of realization, he knew he had to confront his fears, both about his art and his relationships. He had to invite the vulnerability of collaboration and mentorship into his life, to create a network of understanding and support. With that thought, a wave of resolve surged within him. As he picked up his phone ready to reach out, the buzz of a notification interrupted his train of thought. A message from an unknown number appeared. "I saw your work online. Let's talk about your upcoming exhibit." A chill ran down his spine. This could be the connection he needed, the opportunity he had dared to dream of. He stared at the message, his heart racing. The time had come to face his inner fears, to either embrace this unexpected momentum or retreat into the safety of doubt. With a deep breath, he tapped on the screen, preparing to take the plunge into a world that both excited and terrified him. What awaited him on the other side of that message? Was this the beginning of a breakthrough, or just another fleeting moment of hope? The uncertainty kept him on edge as he awaited a response. Ethan's heart raced as he stared at the message, the pixels blurring into his growing apprehension. The prospect of a real connection, a discussion about his art, was both exhilarating and terrifying. He felt suspended in a moment that could alter the course of his creative journey. Taking a breath, he enabled himself to embrace the opportunity rather than shy away from it. Without overthinking, he typed a response, crafting a mix of professionalism and authenticity. "Thank you for reaching out. I'd love to discuss my work further. When are you available?" A sense of urgency propelled his words as he hit send. It was done. Ethan felt an electric pulse of hope intermixed with doubt. What could this person want? Was it a genuine interest in his art, or merely a superficial request? Yet he couldn't linger in uncertainty. He had initiated contact. Now he had to prepare. He turned back to his canvas, but the brush no longer felt as familiar. The vibrant colors he had splashed onto the surface began to swirl with confusion. How could he convey his passions and struggles? Instead of pushing through the discomfort, he paused, recognizing the necessity of reflection. He needed to untangle his thoughts about the upcoming conversation. Ethan grabbed a sketchpad, flipping to a blank page. He wrote down the core ideas he wanted to articulate in their discussion. His artistic vision, the themes he explored, and what motivated his pieces. He focused on the contrasts within his work. Chaos meets harmony, vulnerability meets strength. A voice began to emerge, both on the page and within him. As he wrote, the undercurrents of doubt resurfaced. Who would take him seriously? A new artist with a fragile portfolio, scraping together bits of confidence from each stroke? Was this the time to reveal how much of himself he hoped his art could express? He wrestled with the fear that he wasn't enough. But beneath that fear, he felt the flicker of determination. This was not only about others accepting him, it was about stepping into his own worth. With the pad in front of him, he embraced the challenge. Each thought was a step toward building a foundation he could stand on. What if this meeting could lead to mentorship, opportunity, or even friendship within the industry? He pictured the person he hoped to meet not just an unknown name but a potential ally. This realization forced him to grapple with a decision, to present his most vulnerable self or to construct a facade of confidence. His internal debate intensified as he struggled with the layers of his identity. The artist who had once concealed his identity now needed to reconsider the extreme of weariness and the balance it took to be seen. Before he could finalize his thoughts, a notification interrupted the spiral of introspection. The reply was here. Holding his breath, Ethan opened the message. "I can meet tomorrow at noon. Looking forward to hearing about your vision for the exhibit." Relief washed over him. a wave that swept away some of the tension. The universe was responding. Feeling both elated and frantic, he knew he had little time to prepare. Perhaps he needed to take a step further by inviting feedback from others in the artistic community. Was this the moment he would reach out for critique, guidance, or simply companionship on this path? The fear of judgment loomed large, but the potential for growth flickered brighter. Ethan grabbed his phone, contemplating his next steps. Reaching out could lead to invaluable insights, but it would also require him to expose his artistic vulnerabilities to people he had only recently begun to know. As the shadows lengthened in the room, the realization struck him he needed to embrace collaboration as a key to his development. It wasn't just about proving his worth. It was about building a community that nurtured creativity. But who could he trust? Who would understand the intricacies of his vision without imposing their ideals? With these questions swirling in his mind, he sat back, taking a moment to breathe deeply. The stakes had never been higher, and tomorrow would mark a significant juncture. Would this meeting propel him toward the validation he craved, or would it reveal the harsh realities of the art world he was stepping into? And as dawn approached, a new thought gripped him with uncertainty and motivation alike. How would he showcase his true self amid the expectations of a potentially demanding audience? Ethan awoke before dawn, the remnants of sleep still clinging to him, but anticipation crackled through his veins, quickening his pulse. Memories of his conversation the night before filtered in, questions swirling like autumn leaves. Today would be pivotal. He needed to prepare meticulously, weaving words with intention, shaping a narrative that would resonate. After a quick shower, he dressed with purpose, choosing a navy blue shirt that complemented his art piece's vibrant hues without overshadowing them. He felt it was a bridge to the visual dialogue he wanted to create. Standing before the mirror, he practiced his introduction. He rehearsed not just the words but the emotions behind them. Would they reveal his journey or cloak him in false bravado? As the sun peeked over the horizon, a moment of introspection seized him. He thought about the artists he admired, those who had laid bare their souls for all to see. Perhaps this was an opportunity to channel their bravery, to follow their courage into his own limelight. The hours slipped by as he meticulously organized his portfolio, choosing the pieces that best conveyed his voice. He felt the weight of each painting, a testimony of late nights and untold stories. For the first time, Ethan gathered them not just as representations of his artistic journey but as fragments of himself, each stroke a reflection of vulnerability. As he arranged his work, doubt crept back in like an uninvited guest. He started to wonder if sharing his closely held beliefs about art, the narratives that propelled him, might expose him to unseen risks. What if he found himself dismissed as just another aspiring artist in a sea of talent? The fear was almost paralyzing. Then the inner voice of determination surged forward, reminding him of his earlier reflections about the nuances of connection. He needed to embrace the uncertainty that accompanied honesty. If he presented a facade, the outcomes would always feel hollow. He rolled his shoulders back, grounding himself in the importance of authenticity. With the clock ticking closer to noon, he decided to take a small step beyond his comfort zone. He opened his phone and drafted a message to Maria, a fellow artist he had recently met at an open studio. Time and again, her insight about the creative process had resonated with him. "Hey Maria, do you have a moment to meet before my appointment? I'd love to get some feedback on my work." As he pressed send, a sense of liberation washed over him. Seeking collaboration and critique meant inviting growth. He felt empowered by the prospect of joining forces with someone equally passionate about art. And with that, he embraced the unpredictability of openness, a white-knuckled thrill in his stomach. When a reply from Maria pinged shortly after, saying she could meet in half an hour, adrenaline surged through him. He packed his portfolio, the weight now a comforting reminder of support, purpose, and potential. On his way to the cafe, he reflected on the decisions he had faced today, and looked out at the bustling street. This was a city of dreams, of stories waiting to unfold, and he was ready to contribute to that tapestry. In the cafe, he met Maria. She was warm, her eyes sparking with insight as they sat with his art spread across the table. They discussed colors, themes, and interpretations. Each piece revealed more than he had anticipated, and her enthusiasm sparked a flame within him. They lost track of time in their shared fervor, each critique adding a layer to his understanding of himself as an artist. However, Just as the conversation reached a crescendo, the cafe door swung open, and a tall figure walked in, someone Ethan had only seen in photographs. The curator he would be meeting soon. Ethan's breath hitched. As their gazes locked across the room, he felt a surge of apprehension blanket his earlier confidence. What would happen next? Would he be ready to present his true self before the very audience he feared? He felt raw, standing on the precipice of a moment that defined not just his art but who he was as a person. And as the curator moved toward him, the realization struck. This was it. Ethan had to choose between staying hidden and stepping forward in authenticity, ready to declare his truth to the world. Would he seize the moment, or let it slip away? Ethan's heart raced as the curator approached. Each step mirrored the ticking clock behind him, amplifying the weight of expectation. He could feel the energy in the air shifting, a palpable current of anticipation that coursed through the cafe. His thoughts raced, buzzing with self-doubt. Was he prepared to be vulnerable? Would his art, soaked in his truths, stand up to the scrutiny? "Hello, I'm Mark," the curator said, extending his hand. Ethan's stomach twisted as he met Mark's gaze, a blend of intensity and curiosity that both intimidated and fascinated him. "Hi, I'm Ethan," he managed to reply, swallowing hard before releasing his grip on the portfolio. In a moment of determination, he laid his art before them, a deliberate display that beckoned both examination and engagement. As Mark examined the pieces, Ethan watched him closely. He remembered Maria's insights nestled in the back of his mind, urging him to be engaged, to find his voice despite the weight of uncertainty on his shoulders. This was more than about impressing the curator. It was about sharing his essence and journey as an artist. "I see quite a bit of passion in your work," Mark commented, glancing at Ethan. The statement hung in the air like a promise. "What's the story behind this piece?" He pointed at a vibrant canvas, an explosion of colors swirling together, smoky edges suggesting turmoil and hope entwined. Ethan took a deep breath, channeling the vulnerability he had felt earlier. "It's about my struggles with identity," he began, feeling the words tumble out, uncensored. "I wanted to convey how the chaos of life can meld into something beautiful, even when it feels overwhelming." He felt the truth resonating in his chest, an undeniable fire that forged a connection between them. Mark nodded thoughtfully, his brow furrowed as he listened intently. Ethan could see he was considering more than just the technicalities of the art. There was curiosity about the artist behind it. Was this the bond he hoped to forge with his audience? The realization surged within him, powerful and clear. Connection over perfection. "You articulate that emotion well. Authenticity is often the most magnetic quality in art," Mark said, his tone steady yet keen. Ethan felt a flicker of hope. It was validation he needed, shoring up the frayed edges of his confidence. The conversation deepened, weaving through different themes and sentiments as they unpacked each piece. The initial tension began to dissipate, replaced by a rhythm of dialogue that seemed to flow effortlessly. Every critique, every insight, propelled Ethan closer to the artist he aspired to be. There was power in this engagement, an understanding that grew stronger with each shared word. Yet, amid this exchange of ideas, a disquieting thought gnawed at him. Was he just a fleeting moment in Mark's day? An intriguing oddity spawning conversation out of curiosity? He pushed the notion aside, focusing instead on the uplifting progression of the dialogue. Finally, as they concluded their discussion and Mark leaned back in his chair, appreciation shining in his eyes, Ethan felt poised on the threshold of something monumental. This was far more than he had anticipated. Yet, a question lingered in the back of his mind, gnawing at his newfound clarity. Was he ready to leap beyond this interaction into a wider world where rejection and acceptance danced in a continuous cycle? "Ethan," Mark said, breaking him from his contemplative state, "I'd love to see more of your work. Would you consider presenting at an upcoming exhibition? There's something authentic in your approach that could resonate." The invitation hung between them like a lifeline, and Ethan's pulse quickened with a mix of exhilaration and fear. Could he really step onto that stage? Would exposing more of his internal struggles help or hinder his artistry? His stomach twisted with anticipation. "Yes, I'd be honored," Ethan replied, his voice steadier than he felt as he left the cafe. A mix of exhilaration and dread swirled within him. Questions bubbled beneath the surface. Could he maintain the level of authenticity required in this new arena? What if the wider world rejected the truths he dared to share? With newfound determination coursing through him, he set off into the bustling streets, ready to confront the burgeoning challenge. The moment had indeed arrived, but so had a deeper self-exploration. And as he navigated through the energetic pulse of the city, he caught himself thinking, what shadows of doubt lurked within his past that he hadn't yet confronted? What truths still lay hidden, waiting to emerge in the light? Ethan walked with purpose, the rhythm of the city one with the quickening beat of his heart. Each step felt like a move toward something significant, but doubt still surfaced, those nagging questions harping on the fringes of his mind. As he navigated the bustling streets, he wondered how many others had stood at this crossroads, contemplating the price of vulnerability. The exhibition loomed ahead, an expansive universe where judgment would be laid bare under the intense scrutiny of the art scene. He stopped at a corner and stared into a shop window, his reflection fragmented amidst the colorful display of paintings and sculptures. There he was, just another face in a sea of artists and dreamers, battling the anxiety that threatened to swallow him whole. What did authenticity mean in a world that often prized technique over true expression? He recalled Mark S. Ward's authenticity as a magnetic force. Could that theory hold true when stripped down and exposed? As he walked on, questions spiraled. He had always viewed art as an extension of himself, yet now, he pondered whether it carried the weight of his failures, fears, and unreconciled pieces from the past. The criticisms of earlier days echoed in his psyche, reminding him of rejection he had faced. That one dismissal that stung the deepest still lingered in his thoughts. He paused at a park bench, seeking solace momentarily amidst the chaos. The sunlight filtered through the trees, casting dappled patterns on the ground, a soothing distraction. He had cultivated a habit of retreating into nature whenever self-doubt crept in. Sitting there, he closed his eyes, threw his head back, and inhaled deeply, trying to distance himself from the uncertainty gnawing his gut. Could he unearth the shadows of his past? Would confronting them fortify his art or tear it down? These reflections danced around him, a swirling mass like the colors within his paintings, and he allowed himself to be still, listening. Gradually, he pieced together memories, a childhood moment of triumph when he won an art contest at school. But alongside that, a painful recollection surfaced, a blistering critique from a high school teacher who deemed his style immature. The sting of the words had forged a narrative within him that carried through the years. Artistic daring would lead to rejection. Opening his eyes, Ethan felt a resolve ripple through him. Perhaps diving into those hidden truths was not as detrimental as he had believed. The vulnerabilities he feared exposing could instead become his strength, forming a bridge between his internal struggles and his audience's hearts. He picked up his phone, dialing Maria, instinctively seeking her guidance. "Hey, it's me. Can we meet? I have something important to discuss about the exhibition." He hadn't even planned his approach, but as soon as she answered, he felt the swell of commitment. This was where he needed to start. As he ended the call, the sun dipped lower in the sky, illuminating the path ahead. Ethan's pulse steadied slightly, the decision to turn his past doubts into a foundation for his future work empowering him. He resolved to create not just artworks, but conversations, the raw, unapologetic dialogues reflecting not a polished artist but a journey shared. The American urban landscape around him felt alive with potential. Each honking car, each passerby contributed to the vibrant energy he aimed to encapsulate in his art and upcoming exhibition. The deeper he navigated his past, the closer he would come to amplifying the voice he truly wanted to cultivate. Yet, amidst this newfound clarity, another layer of uncertainty crept in. How would he face the audience that awaited him at the exhibition? He couldn't shake the feeling that, just as the city was a whirlwind of opinions and perspectives, so too would the responses to his revelations be varied and unpredictable. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stood, ready to forge ahead and confront the looming challenge. It was more than mere acceptance. It was about daring to present his narrative in all its chaotic beauty. And as he made his way home, the weight of the future felt lighter. What if behind those vibrant hues on the canvas were even darker shades he had yet to confront? What deeper truths still lay buried within, whispering for liberation? With each passing day, anticipation morphed into relentless energy that fueled Ethan's preparation for the exhibition. Time blurred in a cascade of paint and creativity as he poured his heart onto canvas, striving to embody every essence of his evolving narrative. The gallery space loomed large in his mind, a stage waiting to witness the unveiling of his artistic soul. Ethan had finally chosen to keep his fears as vibrant strokes in his works, revealing the complexities of his identity, rather than hiding them. On the morning of the exhibition, he woke with a clarity that felt foreign yet invigorating. The sunlight streamed into his small studio, illuminating the canvases representing the raw turmoil and beautiful revelations he had unearthed. Every piece told a story, each shade a reflection of the struggles and triumphs he had faced. He stood back, feeling an unwavering sense of purpose. This was more than just art. It was a declaration of who he was becoming. Arriving at the gallery, he felt a mixture of exhilaration and nervousness piercing through him. Beneath the bright lights, throngs of art enthusiasts and critics had gathered, each longing for a glimpse of something profound. As he set his installations, he caught sight of familiar faces, friends he hadn't anticipated seeing, ready to support him. Reinforced by their presence, he took a deep breath, grounding himself in the moment. When the time came for the presentation, Ethan began to speak, his voice steady despite the sea of expectant eyes. Each piece in this collection stems from my journey, an exploration of my essence. He could feel the weight of his father's earlier skepticism hovering at the edges, but today it was a driving force, not a shackle. He discussed the darker hues representing moments of doubt, and echoing the struggles of being an artist in a world where conformity often reigned supreme. He described how he had to confront the lies he had accumulated over the years, the belief that his art was merely a hobby, that authenticity could be superseded by expectations. A sense of liberation washed over him as he articulated the chaos of his life, how it transformed into brilliant landscapes on canvas. As he concluded, the room erupted in applause, a beautiful acknowledgement of his courage. But the applause didn't just come from the crowd. It echoed within him, validating every brushstroke, every choice he had made on this arduous path. Stepping back, he saw Mark's familiar figure lingering at the back of the gallery, his expression a blend of admiration and contemplation. The man who had once cast a shadow now stood illuminated by the vibrant lights of Ethan's revelation. Later, as the night progressed, Mark approached Ethan, the conversations continuing to swirl around them. For the first time, Ethan witnessed a shift rather than scrutiny. "I underestimated you," Mark admitted, sincerity glowing in his voice. "You took a risk and transformed it into something beautiful." The words cascaded like warm sunlight, penetrating the walls Ethan had built around himself. Ethan felt a swell of pride. He had proved not just to Mark but to himself that he could navigate the path he chose, one painted with authenticity rather than fear. A weight lifted. "Thank you for giving me the chance to show you what art means to me," he replied, meeting his father's gaze with a newfound strength. As the night wound down, Ethan watched the attendees engage with his art. Each connection he made sparked a realization this was the life he had yearned for, a narrative he could share without hesitation. His identity, once fractured between familial expectations and personal ambitions, found harmony amid the vibrant colors of his canvas. By the end of the evening, Ethan had not only showcased his art, but had also cemented his footing as a confident artist, embracing all facets of himself. He left the gallery with a heart full of promise, knowing that he had finally begun to carve out a space where he belonged, an artist recognized not just for his talent but for his authenticity. And in that moment of departure, as the city lights twinkled like stars embracing the night, Ethan realized that true success stemmed from the courage to express his voice boldly. No longer an echo in someone else's symphony, he had become the composer of his own narrative, ready to explore the boundless horizons ahead. You need to subscribe now to our channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share. Only true fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting our channel through these actions.